avionics, aviation, do they fit? Interesting theme. A little bit about AFuzion. We're a small, large company, one of the largest in this space of safety critical software for aviation. We've done over 250 projects on site, 35 countries, and I'm traveling this weekend to a couple countries, meeting some of our other engineers overseas. So nice to be traveling again. We do safety critical engineering, augmentation, mentoring. We do certification in all the different standards, guidelines, DO 178, 254, 4754, 47, all those DO and ARPs. We do training. Our next class is on June 6th, 9th, remote. Those always sell out. We limit it to 30 people. Just make sure you have good QA time. So check our website out, pop us an email. You can see our next class, literally, remote, June 6th to the 9th. And we also do private training. These slides you're about to watch are from Ken's Agile 2-day course. We spread it over 3 days when remote for Agile. Many engineers, companies have learned Ken's great technology for incorporating Agile into DO 178, DO 278, even 254. So when we ask, can it work? Can Agile and 178C, 278 work together? Obviously, the answer is yes, we're doing it. We also have process optimization templates and checklists that over 7,500 engineers at 200 companies use worldwide. With that, you remember these babies on slide 3, and I'll turn it over to Ken after this. This is the cover sheet of our mandatory standard, right? Software considerations, well, it's a guideline. It's flexible, but it's based on waterfall from its old days. Most companies use V model. A few are starting to use subsets. They're using a spiral model-based development. But 178, 278, these aviation guidelines, they require a defined formal process, okay? Formal, not informal. People often think Agile is a lowercase a. Well, it's not. It can be formal. It requires in-process reviews, traceability, top to bottom, bottom to top, continuous change review. How do we do that with Agile? And very important, transition criteria. Proving as you transition from safety, systems, high-level requirements, low-level requirements, architecture, design, code, down to tests, you have inputs and outputs for each phase. For example, there's 6 inputs and 2 outputs to every code review. If you have 5 of those, congratulations, do it again. Well, everyone knows what that is. If you don't know what those 6 inputs are, check out our complimentary online webinars. Just look on YouTube or come to our 2-day training. But we're not going to talk about that because you want to learn about Agile. And remember, 178, 278 also require very proactive, continuous SQA. Not Microsoft Apple. I'm holding up this Apple iPhone right now. Not their SQA that does testing, but a policeman, an adult, mother, father, aunt, uncle, strong brother, sister that assess, they audit. And then ultimately, we need an integration, a tight coupling with systems safety, with continuous feedback. Well, those things aren't built into Agile, but they can be. Remember, you cannot use C or C++ either, can you? You use a safe subset. That's right. Well, what might the safe subset of Agile be? How can you really incorporate that? Well, as they say, let's rock and roll. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Ken, and he is just really incredible. Okay, so Ken, I'm going to turn it over to you. You are now the presenter showing your slides. So you can just shift over and there you go.
All right, so hopefully everyone can.
You can expand that up. There you go. Perfect.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, it's a pleasure to be here and talk to you a little bit about a topic that I've had the opportunity to play with over the last several years and have become a strong advocate of. That is how using Agile in a context that will help us build safety critical software. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to look at the Agile Manifesto. Not a lot of words, 67 I think is the last time I counted, but certainly this statement and and the principles that flowed from it, that were put together at the same time, have had a significant influence on the way we do business, the way we've developed software over the last several years. And so Agile came about as almost a reaction. If you remember back to in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a motion in the industry toward more heavyweight process. The big names, Department of Defense, NASA, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, FAA, all were orienting themselves toward, if I just put more surveillance, if I just had a more well-defined process, if I just had more checks and balances, I could eliminate the defects that were killing our projects. Well, in reality, what happened then is that in the early 2000s, 2001 to be specific, a group got together. I guess there was no, in Snowbird, Utah, I guess there was no snow on the ground for them to go skiing. So, and they came together and said, wait a minute, hold the phone. Let's not forget why we're here. And let's try to organize ourselves so we can take advantage of the talents that you pay a lot of money for when you're building systems. Agile and the Agile Manifesto was the result. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, Agile is not a development lifecycle. It is actually a set of principles, a set of values. And those principles really work for any time you're trying to do creative work as a group. As a result, it's found a niche in many different applications. I've seen Agile being applied at the systems level. I've seen Agile being provided hardware teams. Certainly, this was organized to operate with software teams. Been used within quality assurance. Been used with developing proposals. So because it is so adaptive, and because it's merely it's a set of principles to be followed, it has a lot of places where it can be applied. Well, in the same context, over the last couple decades, we've had a number of alternative ways to create software come about and be discussed, so that, and as a result, many of them have claimed the moniker of Agile. There's nothing wrong with that. That is fantastic, in fact, because it's different people from the ground up, from the grassroots, trying to come up with a better way to deliver quality software that we can depend on in our safety critical or other applications. When you look, however, across the board at the number of different methods that have been produced, what you see is a strong tendency toward Scrum. Not that Scrum is the best one or is the correct one, but Scrum has won over almost half of the community out there because of its features, because it is a blending of structure with flexibility. And as a result, we like it because it serves as a good foundation for where we're going in when you're going to deal with safety critical software. So this is the classic picture you see when you think of Scrum, and if we think about Scrum, it has certain features that have facilitated our development and its success in the development of software. Certainly, it is centered around this activity called a sprint, where you time box an activity, you time box your team and say, okay, team, we are going to work on this small set of problems, and we as a group are going to come up with the answer. It assumes that the team has got all the talent they need to get the job done. They've got all the materials they need. There's no delays because they don't have the information they need. Everything is ready to go. And so they can actually come to the start line and start running and get to the end very effectively. It produces something that is often called a potentially deliverable product. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. But the key about that is that team is building something that they would put in front of their customer. And in the safety world, that means risking life and limb, because it's software that is going to influence, control, and put an aircraft potentially at risk. So certainly we want to make sure that we're doing a good job, but that notion of the team being dedicated, focused, able to build something of a quality characteristic that has a quality product and is defect free, something we expect and we hope we see that we can get through the Scrum. At the front end, it's fed by a list of go-dos, a list of a set of items that have to be implemented. Now, one of the notions about Scrum is that that's a continually changing kind of activity, because we keep a list of features we want implemented in a project. We keep them attuned to what we know about the project, adapting to the changing understanding as we go forward. We keep them prioritized, and so the team is always fed with the most recent view of what it is important to do. How can we add value to the customer? Now, when it comes to the safety world, safety critical software, we need to rethink about what value means. Now, if I'm building a website, value is capabilities, features the customer can use. That's great. But in the safety world, one of the most important customers is the person whose life is on the line when it comes to an aircraft. And to protect that, as a community, as a country, we have decided that we're going to have certification officials, the FAA, other countries, EASA, etc. But some objective look-see at the product to make sure we can really risk life and limb. I don't care if you're building an automobile, if you're building a rocket ship, if you're building an aircraft. When software is involved, or any system is involved in that product that you're going to put your neck on, then you want to make sure that it works right. And that's really what 178 is all about, making sure that you've considered the right things so that you can risk the safety of someone or some group of someone's on. And of course, we're talking about Agile and how that can be fit in. So as Vince pointed out, is it a fit? Well, I'm going to say yes, and hopefully by the time we're done, I'm going to have you nod your head up and down in the same manner. But in doing that, we have to, I think, relook at or continue to keep in mind the notion of who is the customer? What are we adding value to? And I argue, and I think hopefully you'll see by the end of this discussion, that one element of value in developing safety critical software is the ability to certify. Certainly you can't put something on an airplane that's not certified and that you don't have any confidence in. And so certainly the value is providing new business opportunity. But there's also value in just being something that you can rely upon, something that you know the pedigree of, something that you know that if you ask it to do something, it will do it, perform it in the way in which it was expected. So we want to look at both aspects of that. We need to reassess not only what the value proposition is for Agile, but what the 178 expects in order to help us get to a reliable and safe system. Now there are a number of methodologies out there. We can talk about waterfall, we can talk about V model, we can talk about spiral development, we can talk about incremental development, we can talk about rapid development, and they've all come about over time as people have tried to find a better way to solve the problem. But when you back up, what you see is they all got the same characteristics. They all go through these three high-level phases. Got to figure out what you're going to do. You got to go do it, and then you got to show that you did it correctly. Now, all of them vary in terms of how big a piece of the elephant that you tackle at any given time. They vary in terms of the feedback loops. They vary in terms of the interaction, the amount of work you do, and how much surveillance you have. All those are important features that are designed to make the methodology, the development lifecycle, work for you. But essentially, all of them have the same characteristics. And so when we look at software development, we see the same thing. Certainly, there's the idea of figuring out what we're going to do. Now, usually in software development, that's driven by the system, right? We have a system design. It's been identified as a software component has to be created or provided. That component has to then have certain features, and that comes from systems, and that is allocated down to the software activity. But once you get inside that software activity, it takes some churning, some understanding of, as we go through an elaboration of from what the customer needed to what the customer is going to be provided. And then we take it down and we go create that activity, and then we come back and we confirm that we really did the job correctly. And when we're done, we give it back to the person who was asking, the team that was asking, and we say that we have delivered an effective product. When it comes to safety, however, the angst goes up just a little bit. It goes up a lot, actually. And that's where 178 comes in. So 178 layers upon the assumption of a basic philosophy of building software with an appropriate set of checks and balances to make sure that as we go through the steps, go through the phases that we see in most development life cycles, or in all development life cycles, we don't make mistakes, that we do what we were supposed to do, that the approach that has been agreed to is being followed, that where we've defined standards, that we have met standards on down the line. So 178 for safety critical software introduces that extra surveillance, and I think appropriately, because if you're going to put yourself at risk in a system that's controlled by software, you want to make sure safety has been considered, and you want to make sure it performs in the way in which you would expect it. But Agile is, and Scrum is a method. So how does that method fit into that life cycle, that matrix we just saw? Well, I'm going to suggest this is one way that we could do that, or it could do that. Now, Agile is a way of getting something done, and so there, as you go through each of the burnt orange boxes on here, they're all about getting something done. So I could apply Agile in any one of these contexts. Could have applied it to system design. Could have applied it to system verification. Focused in on the middle, however, because that's the big dog in this fight. That's where we expend most resources. That's where the rubber meets the road. And so Agile we've seen that Agile can be exploited, in particular Scrum can be exploited, as we go in and try and get the economies and efficiencies of taking a little bit different tact to how you organize and marshal the resources that you have at your disposal for your project. So Agile then, we're focused in the middle, but we certainly could have done it anywhere. Now, as we go through, what we're going to talk about is some of the various features of Agile, but just remember, we're honing in right in the middle. So how then do we apply that notion of Scrum to 178? Well, if you look at 178, there are three high-level key processes. There's planning, there's the go get it done, go develop, and then there's integral processes. And we'll talk about each one of them. Each one of them has aspects that would be reflective or would affect the Agile or Scrum approach. And I'm going to use those terms interchangeably because we really are focusing on Scrum here because of it gives us a good framework, as I mentioned. But each of them have different impacts are affected in different ways by Agile, and that's what we want to explore. Of course, the first is planning. Now, I'm not going to read the slide to you, but I ask you to think about, why do we plan? What are we really trying to do? Well, I argue that planning is nothing more than organized coordination. You're laying out what you're going to do. You're identifying what's important. You're coordinating activity both internal to a project and external to the project. And so you're trying to communicate what your approach is so that the other people that are affected by you, whether it's a parallel piece of the system, whether it's the system itself, whether it's the customer who's paying the bill, the other people who have a dog in the fight, those people understand what you're doing so that they can make plans based on it. That's a good thing in that you communicate. But there's another edge to that sword, because what they do is they use that information to make their plans. So there are a lot of moving parts when you pull together a system. And as a software team, when you delineate, you make promises of, this is the approach I'm going to take, this is the approach, this is what I'm going to deliver you, this is when you're going to have it. There are other elements of the system, other activities that are impacted by that. And so your plan has to communicate what you intend to do in sufficient detail to allow that coordination. And really, that's about the size of it when it comes to planning. There's no such thing as a bad plan. The only right one is the one everyone agrees to. And when they agree to it, what they're saying is, I've looked at what you're doing. I've got confidence that if you follow this approach, you're gonna get to the endpoint successfully. I have enough information to organize my activity, and so let's go forward. Let's follow this. And that's why we put plans under control, because when you break that, change your plan, you're effectively breaking that bond, breaking that contract with your peer, the peer element of your project. And so you want to make sure that they understand that there's been a change and they can adapt as well. So planning at its very basic is about getting things organized and getting things coordinated. But it doesn't necessarily have to be detailed. In fact, planning for one of the most popular methods for planning at the project level is called rolling wave planning. The idea is pretty simple. The stuff that's right in front of me, I'm going to plan in detail because I know what the heck I have to do. The stuff in the future, I'm going to keep it a higher level because I don't know. Number one, things could change a little bit before I get there, and my ideas could alter a little bit. But number two, I don't need to know that detail until I get there, and then I can incorporate the information I have into the solution, the approach that I'm going to follow. Agile does that overtly. It builds that notion straight in. Agile has this thing called, or Scrum has this notion of sprint planning. What is sprint planning? Nothing more than sitting down with the team that's going to get the job done and saying, what are we going to do over the next couple weeks? Very tactical. With that, because you know that's there, you're allowed in your plans to drop back. I don't have to worry about that detail. I have confidence it's going to work right. I can focus on the strategy, on the high level organization for this project. And so my plans can be at a little bit higher level. I don't have to delineate exactly what everyone's going to do every day. And because that detail, I'm here to tell you, it's going to change. Life changes. Life is about adaptation. Agile builds that in. It embraces it and says, let's use the change. Let's take advantage of how we understand how our growth of the system, and always keep our nose on the bubble. Always focus on what is the most important thing to do today. That's what sprint planning is all about. That's why Agile facilitates planning for the better. And in addition, what it does is it gives you the ability to truly understand. It gives us refinement, something that you can't do when you planned it 12 months ago. When you laid out a project a long time ago, you're making assumptions and at a very high level about what life is going to be like when you get in the trenches. Well, Agile allows you to incorporate that or to take advantage of that knowledge to work into your plans. And so we're always focused on the most effective course of action, but we're focused on what we have to do, not constraining how we have to do it. And that's an important aspect of Agile. So the planning process certainly Agile gives us some benefits, and I think gives us a better approach to planning. I'm also an advocate of rolling wave planning when it comes to project management. But let's talk about development. How do we actually build that thing? Well, let's look at each of the steps we got to go through. So first of all, requirements analysis. What is requirements analysis? Well, basically, it's the realization that the system, because they're not focused on what it means to build software, sometimes haven't given you the perfect definition of what is required. Sometimes their definition, the statements are more objectives than statements of what a real need. Sometimes they're vague. Sometimes they're conflicting. Sometimes they forget about the implementation details that have to be there. So requirements analysis is this organized approach to fleshing out the need, identifying where the confusion factor is, getting answers to those questions, defining things in a way in which we can build them so that we understand them, we can test them, and we know they're really needed and how they fit into the grand scheme. Of course, in the safety realm, it also includes making sure that we think about safety and how the system is impacted by anything that we do, or that the characteristics that are built into the software. A crux element of almost every improvement I've ever seen in software development methodology, has been a focus on operational utility. What's this stuff really going to do for you? Agile builds that in. Agile, Scrum at least, gives you, or is organized around this notion of user stories. A user story is indeed an amplification of how the system might be used or will be used. Agile allows interaction. Agile allows, it has this notion of the ready queue, which says, if it's not ready, I'm not taking it in. I'm not going to make any assumptions. I'm not going to guess. I'm going to go let you figure the problem out before we bring it on in. So Agile facilitates that understanding that always is essential when it comes to requirements analysis. Agile also improves design. What is design? It's that activity of taking now that these well-defined needs and producing a solution, inventing an answer, and putting it in a context of little widgets that I can go off and really implement. Now, in the 178 world, we call those little widgets LLRs. We could have called them widgets. We could have called them blocks. We could have called them anything else, but they're still the things that have to be implemented. And how is design accomplished? It's accomplished interactively. It's many minds coming together to come up with a great solution. Now, classic development says we take an expert, put them in a corner, let them come up with a design, and then they put it on paper, and then they commit to, and then everyone reviews it, and there's a cycle of killing trees. Don't do that. Agile doesn't do it that way. Don't do it that way. Exploit the communication of Agile, the interaction, design as a working group. Don't document what you intend to, what you think might work. Document what you, after evaluation, what you have come up with as how you intend to realize it. And that's really how you adjust at the design activity when using Agile. And so the end result is a set of low-level requirements, a set of widgets that you're going to go implement. Those we translate into the backlog items that we saw on that previous screen, because those things that I have to go build, those are the go-dos that are going to feed feed the pipeline of the Scrum team. So remember, we've got this pipeline of products, this product backlog, and we keep it in constant priority order by value to the project and to the customer. In a time box manner, we go back and we grab the things that are topmost on the list and we roll them in, and then we tackle them, and then we successfully provide them or not, and then the things that we don't provide, we put back on our list to go do, and we constantly keep the list there of what has to happen, and we focus on what's important. So there's features in Agile or in Scrum that give us the ability to move aggressively against and successfully against that product backlog. First of all, there's constant grooming. There's constant prioritization. We always know that I can go to that list and get the most important stuff. We have a daily review where we say, how are we coming? What are we accomplishing? Do you need help? What are the roadblocks? Get rid of them so that the team can be effective. Certainly, the team has all the talent they need, is organized to have all the talent they need to get the job done. Interaction is pushed to the limit, face-to-face, hopefully, but significant focus on interaction. Basically, the team is operating as one. And that's an important notion if you think about it. How would you organize if you only had one developer? Well, what you do is you would give them the most important tasks. They would tackle it. You wouldn't try to understand what's going on inside their brain, the left brain versus the right brain. What you would do is look at the result of what that single person produced. Agile works in a safety critical environment when that team is operating as one. Now that's not easy to do. It requires a team to be performing. It requires a lot of structure and support to make sure it continues to operate. But if you can get them there, if you can get the team to operate as one, then that instead of left brain, right brain, it's left developer, right developer, and front developer and back developer. It's those people coming together to solve the problem, communicating, and then you don't have to layer a bunch of stringent controls on top of them to make sure they're successful. But that requires the commitments, the values you see here. Are you committed? Are you focused? Are you open? Are you respectful? Do you have the courage to say, it's not right? That is what you would do if you were an individual. It's what your team needs to do if you're an Agile team. So that takes us to building a product. Well, what about the last one, the integral processes? How does Agile fit into that? Well, let's look at each one of the integral processes. Certainly, verification is part of the deal, part of the things to be looked at. When it comes to when you look at Agile, there's no difference. The expectation is the same. You got to verify that you got where you intended to go. That each of those requirements that you laid out, those widgets, those nuggets, got implemented in the way in which it was intended. And so it's a systematic evaluation of did I get the job done? Now, Agile gives you some benefits in this area. First of all, it's not one person putting together those tests, it's a team. And so exploit the team. Exploit the multiple sets of gray cells, exploit the multiple sets of eyes, exploit the interaction of the team. You'll get a better set of tests. Indeed, what you want to do, however, is recognize that verification is not the same as test. Testing happens all the time. It's happened in any kind of development. As developers put things together, they incrementally look at how good how well have I done? How much progress have I made? Evaluating the product to know that they really are getting where they on the right track and head in the right direction. The mistake that teams make is that they try to take credit for that. Don't. Recognize that, treat it like it was a single developer. Don't try and get inside their brain. Look at what they produce. And that's exactly how we see verification happening in an Agile context, in a Scrum context. Evaluate the output of the team, the output of the sprint in a systematic manner. Don't try to stick your nose in and say, did you have the right, and look at interim products, because that requires way too much control and it will become a boat anchor to your project. So just don't do it. Accept the fact that you've repeated some tests. Guess what? It happens all the time. And rather focus on the output, and you'll end up with a better product and therefore fewer cycles back in terms of the product itself. When it comes to CM, no different. You still have to stay in control. And so the whole same kind of notion for CM happens is there. However, Agile does give you some benefits. First of all, you have this notion of most systems of a backlog item. That backlog item is really originally just a go-do list. However, it's morphed over time. So it's now most of the tools that we use make the backlog item a repository of information. Everything that's changed, all of the notes, definition of acceptance criteria, delineation of problems people had, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Exploit it. Integrate that into your CM system, and you won't have so much bureaucracy on the CM side. It can be done very effectively. We've seen it done time and time again. You do have to manage scope growth because it is a risk. I mean, let's think about it. You're going to go to refinement and say, hey, boss, what did you really want? And that's obviously an opportunity to expand, right? So you need some discipline, and you really need to rely on the product owner and the Scrum Master to kind of keep that under control. But as long as it does, then then it's not going to be a problem for your project. And if it happens, and it will happen, kick it back to CCB. Not because you want to be bureaucratic, though, because you're changing the contract, you're changing the concept. You need to make sure that the other dogs in the fight have reflect what is important to them, the other stakeholders. And so you want to make sure that they're on board with the alterations that you're making. But that being said, Agile set up for it, right? You just push that thing back to the ready queue, back out of the ready queue. You then go get CCB approval, and then you bring it back in on a priority basis. So maybe a risk, but something that you can easily control. When it comes to QA, essentially the same concept, but a significantly different operation. Remember, QA's job is to confirm that you have conformed to your plan, that you built what you expected to build in the way in which you expected to build. You plan to build it when you plan to build it, that the right people were involved, that you followed your plan. Well, if you plan high level, if you only put constraints on the periphery of the sprint of the Scrum team, if you keep your plan strategic, then that's easy, right? That means QA focuses on that area as well. And so it's not a different notion, but it is a different scope. You might say, well, maybe you might have the opportunity to save some effort when it comes to QA. That's neither here nor there, I think, because I don't think it's significant. But the bottom line is they focus on the big things, the important things, and not whether or not people develop function A before function B, whether or not they used this version of a compiler or that version of a compiler. As long as it comes together and it works, then we're going to be successful. And QA is there to confirm that it does. Some final thoughts, because I know we have just a few minutes left. What is Agile great for? Well, Agile is built around adaptation. It's focused on it. It's designed to improve. Focus on what's important. It's, however, recognize that focus is by the team, and that team is very narrow, is very tactical. So they might optimize locally as opposed to the project as a whole. So you want to make sure you communicate outside of the team on what the team is doing, so that other people who are influenced can make sure that they don't have an issue with it. Certainly, Agile is designed to eliminate waste. I'm here to argue, and I hope you see that certification activity is not waste. It's necessary. It provides value. It gives the steps that we go through, gives us confidence and defines the pedigree of the product, and it allows us to put it in environments where we have to depend on it. It's certainly focused at delivering user value. Yes, remember that safety has value. It's if my mom is getting on an airplane, I want to make sure that she's going to land safely, and so safety has value to me, and hopefully you can see it. Hopefully it has value to you as well. Remember that the Agile team is a team. That is good, and it's also very bad. Most teams go through a normal evolution. It's been called forming, storming, norming, and then performing. You want performing, because that's when you have that team operating as one. They're clicking, everyone's communicating, there's trust flowing, things are working. However, it's hard to keep them there, and that takes art. There's an art to that, and you rely on your Scrum Master to facilitate that, and your management structure to facilitate that. Changing someone in the team can break the team. Tweaking the team and always changing with the direction, constraining them, that breaks trust. You don't want to do that. You want to keep your team at the performing level. There's a risk the team can isolate. Remember, they're a group that says, "Hey, we got this, right? Leave us alone. We'll build it." But what happens if they run into cases where they don't have information? They might not ask for it. And so again, the Scrum Master and the product owner are important assets to elevate those kind of issues. And finally, Agile is designed to build small increments of functionality, and that's great. However, the potentially deliverable notion doesn't quite fit in the safety realm, because before we kick that out, we have to make sure it meets the safety expectation, that it's reliable. And so that swirl can take time. And so the team has to see their product as being potentially deliverable. They have to be committed to it. They have to be delivering a product that they will rely on, and they are proud of. But we may not get it out the door as frequently as they would like. And so oftentimes we'll see teams organizing sprints into a series of epics, where the verification activity happens at the epic level. It works, and it can be effective. So is Agile a fit? Yes, I think it is. I hope you do as well. However, it does require some adjustment and some interpretation. Hopefully you've seen some of the areas. Now, obviously, we didn't have a lot of time this morning. We focused on the high points, and actually skimmed a lot of the info that was on the slide, so I apologize for that. But focused on the high points, and in order to kind of cover the waterfront, if we've piqued your interest, you can go to the AFuzion website. You'll find more detailed white papers there on this topic and others. So I encourage you to do that. And if you really want more in-depth understanding and study, as Vance mentioned, we do offer Agile training in the context of 178, the context of 278, in the context of 254. And so we can actually customize it to your specific need. So we don't have an incredible amount of time left, but we do have a few minutes. So questions?
Ken, that was terrific. And we do have a few questions. Folks, go ahead and keep inputting your questions. Let's just go with first in, first out order. How about that? And Ken, thanks very much. By the way, folks, Ken is AFuzion's technical director, very capable, manages the technical direction of AFuzion, and just does a terrific job. Thanks for being our guest host speaker here today, Ken. Our first question: does QA get new code iteratively to do integration testing verification, or they get it after a few sprints? I think by QA we might mean testing.
So QA can look at we encourage QA to be looking at the outputs of the product of the sprint. So that comes out as an increment, right? So now they could gang it to make their activity efficient, but they're always looking at some chunk of the product. But it's not just product. It's also code. It's also documentation. It's also design materials. It's also maybe refinement of requirements. So it's all the materials that the team is responsible for.
Very good, very good. Oh, and we got a question from our friend Tom, I think, over in UK. Very cool. Good afternoon. Tom asks, has your experience with Agile been limited just to software, or have you seen it integrated with systems, hardware, software? Let me take a first stab at that and then turn it over to Ken. We were auditing a project 2 years ago and saw 5 young people around a very large monitor, meter wide. And it wasn't the project I was auditing, but it was our client. So I asked the team, who's the developer here? They had a portable keyboard. Well, guess what? They said, like a Monty Python movie in perfect unison, we are the developers. Well, they were members of hardware, software, and systems, about 5 people total. And they were literally writing the code. I said, oh my goodness, I'm thinking about independence. It was a level B Bravo project, so we need that independence. And I said, well, who verifies this? And they said, oh, we have a separate verification team. They're Agile also. And it turned out to be a hugely productive team. It worked because, as Ken repeatedly emphasized, with a firm, stern voice, with a tinge of humor, you got to know Ken. It's about the team working together. If you have that alpha male, and could be an alpha female too, you know, the type A dictatorial type, it doesn't work, okay? But this team has figured out how to do Agile, incorporate it with systems, hardware, software, and it works very well. It's their companies with benchmarks, their most productive team. And it's really terrific. It's heartwarming to see the training paying off for that. Ken, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that kind of hits the point right in the head. I have seen it worked in systems. I've seen it applied to QA as a team. Seen it applied to not as often to hardware, but only because the hardware teams that I tend to come in contact with are using off-the-shelf stuff and tend to be very tiny, 1, maybe 2 people. But when you have a large group of people doing hardware development, it works just fine.
Good point. Ken, one person asked, do we know of any programs that had been certified using Agile? And I do know a couple, including that one that I just mentioned. It's a big California company, not one of the top 10 aerospace companies, but top 30. Southern California, that narrows it down a bit. Their stuff is flying. So level B, Bravo, avionics, and you know, level A is just level B with MCDC source binary correlation and much more redundancy to give it that 100 times, typically greater, depends on the aircraft certification basis, but 100 times better reliability. That's not coming from the software. That's coming from the redundant hardware. Ken, I think you know a few Agile projects that have been certified also, eh?
Certainly. And in fact, the way I'll answer is this way, Vance. When I left Honeywell 3 years ago, it was reflective of the industry, and I think you and I have both agreed that in the industry today, probably 3/4 of the projects have some aspect of Agile incorporated into them, and so everything that we're doing now as an industry is reflective of Agile, at least in some contexts.
Very, very good point. We have a question. Can DevOps enhance Agile for safety critical system development? Want to handle that one, Ken?
Say that again, Vince. I don't see it.
Oh, DevOps. Can DevOps enhance Agile for safety critical systems development?
I worry about DevOps because most people, when they think of DevOps, they think about rapid deployment. There needs to be in any kind of in a safety critical deployment, you need to make sure that you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's. You can't just toss things up on the internet and have everybody download it overnight and then try it out in their world to see if it works. You got to already know that it works. So DevOps works, the notions of DevOps works, but the demand on what DevOps has to satisfy is more stringent in a safety critical world.
Yeah, very good point. One listener asked us to tell what are the disadvantages of using Agile.
Scope, the one I worry the most, scope growth. You're basically opening yourself up every 2 weeks to, please give me more to do. And that can be a never ending story. I think that was probably one of the things that used to kill the spiral development. That's probably the biggest one. The next thing I worry about is, do I really have a performing team? I can get people and organized to get the job done. That's not a problem. But what's hard to do is to get them to communicate, to get them to recognize that they have the right to operate, to be free. Sometimes people don't immediately understand that. They're comfortable being controlled, and you got to get them out of that mode to say, go be inventive, go give me an answer. All I want you to do is be successful, and tell me what to do to help you to be successful. It's okay, I'll get it done.
That's very true. Okay, we got a fun question here. Time for two more, I think. When planning a project with Agile methods, should that be described as Agile in the PSEC and software development plan already? And how do DERs react to that? Well, we always tell you, remember Mark Twain, the famous American writer, always tell the truth, then you don't have to remember anything, right? Yeah, so always tell the truth. We say the PSEC is where you show your weapons, right? Open your code. Well, yes, but I wouldn't say in a PSEC where we do it that we claim we're using pure Agile. That's a bit of a red herring. I say that we're using lean and efficient methods, okay, that embody a subset of safe Agile, okay, as described in the software development plan. And just those couple sentences in the PSAC, and then we do need to put that in the development plan. And we'll talk about that in the context of the next question, which is where do SOI 1 and 2 fit into the development process? So the development plan is going to devote a couple pages, because remember, it's not small letter A Agile, it's large, yeah, capital A. It's a process, it's a formal methodology, not a formal method, but a methodology. And we need to describe where those transitions fit, how QA works, when we do reviews, what happens to changes, because those are the missing elements of traditional Agile, if you will. So we're going to specify those in the development plan, and also the verification plan. Let's not forget that. How does verification fit in? We can't just wait till the end and verify, right? So verification is ongoing as well, and it needs a formalization. But remember, we can have early changes that we don't have to track. We can prototype. And in many ways, Agile is a prototyping process. So the formality comes when the software is solidified, okay? And we review the design based on the high-level requirements which we need. And then the design is the architecture, low-level requirements, and then code, okay? But let's talk about that next question. How do SOI 1 and 2 fit in to Agile? Kid, you want to address that one?
Oh, sure. So SOI 1 is straightforward. Where you put together your plans. They are, as we've talked about, high level, so they don't go incredibly, they don't bind your team. But, and as Vance mentioned, they refer to the efficient way in which you're going to build things, the flexible way in which you're going to adapt to the most important problem. And so SOI 1 goes pretty much the way it does now. When it comes to SOI 2, what you're trying to show is that the development activity as planned is working out. And so I like to see SOI 2 closer to the mid to late part of the project, because which by that time, which you've probably been through several epics, you've demonstrated that you're following that high level plan you've put together, you're performing And so you have the concerns that might be introduced by terms like if you put Agile in your plans, or you talk about flexibility, the concerns that a reader might get will have been resolved. And they'll demonstrate, say, look, it really is working, and we really are compliant, and we really are producing a product that will be useful and that we can rely on. So I like it more toward the latter end of the project, latter end of the development swirl.
Very good. We've got many more questions, but let's hit one from our friend David, who asks, how do we see Agile Scrum helping with software effort estimation? And what advice would you give to assist in that part of the project planning, actually doing the estimation reflective of Agile?
Ooh,
Ken, you want to?
You know, this is a
That's a good
one of my hot points. So how do we estimate? Well, we take history and we slam it together and say, okay, if the box is this big, this is how long it's going to take, and this is how much it's going to cost. And we use models for that. It was Kokomo, Slim, whatever. It doesn't really matter. The point is that it's an aggregation of project level performance, and so that sets the bounds on what we expect to spend. But Agile is built to give you that direct feedback on how you're really working. So once you stabilize your team, and it usually takes about 3 or 4 sprints, once you stabilize your team, you have got basically what they call velocity. What that means is how much stuff are you getting done in each project, in each sprint. So given you know how much stuff is out there in the queue, you almost constantly have a very rational estimate of time to complete. And so it's an incredibly beneficial tool to constantly be feeding back to, well, wait a minute, I thought the bread box was this big. I see that based on the progress, I'm telling you that I'm either going to be over or under. And so it's an incredibly good feedback tool, which I don't think is exploited often enough.
I think you're right. And just a note on that regarding estimation, there's a lot of claims that Agile will improve efficiency by 50–70% with a corresponding price reduction. We have not seen that. We have found that on the first deployment of Agile, with the refinement, the inefficiencies, learning, it's about a wash, meaning there's not a cost savings that first time, sorry. It's that learning curve. But the second time, we're seeing cost savings of 15% to 25%, which is not huge. It's not a life changer, but it's significant. If a company has a 10% profit margin, you know, all of a sudden having a 20 to 30 is huge, okay? And hopefully you'll take those cost savings and pay your engineers more. Folks, we're at the top of the hour. We've got to move on. I know you do too. Our Agile training is done privately because each company is different. So if you're interested in Agile training, it's 2 to 3 days. At our next public training in regular 178C is June 6th to 8th, I think, remote. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining in. It's really been a pleasure, and a huge thank you to Mr. Ken Hebert. Dr. Ken Hebert, he has a PhD. He's smarter than me by far, for being our guest lecturer today. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Vince. And I mean, it's been fun. So thanks a bunch, guys.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.